Okay, so right up to this point, you've been invoking science, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly, science is trumped by psychology.
No.
Yes, yes.
No.
Yes, because according to you, now your gender is not a fact in the natural world.
Correct.
Your gender...
Your genetic sex and what your chromosomes are, those are facts, but your gender is a social construct. This is the difference between, let's say, someone who's genetically male and someone who's genetically female. Okay. Someone who has XX or XY chromosomes. And by the way, there are more than 2 of those because there's all sorts of chromosomal abnormalities. There are intersex people. The number of people who are born intersexed every year would shock most people because they just don't think that this sort of thing happens. However, that is about what your chromosomes are, what genetic predisposition you have. But it doesn't talk about what your state of mind is, what sort of self-perception you have. And so in addition to genetic sex, we also have gender, which actually falls into a number of different categories. So my apologies to all of my trans friends for the things that I'm about to get slightly wrong. There's a difference between gender identity and gender expression. And the gender identity is the gender that you associate with. But the reason I say these are social constructs is because what is a man? What makes a man a manly man? Well, you have the machismo aspect of the brawny and blah, blah. But is someone who is weaker and more effeminate somehow less of a man? This is why this is a social construct, because it has to do with what roles we as a society put on it, which is why 150 years ago, pink was for boys and blue was for girls, and now it has reversed, although I would go with black for everybody. But the thing is, at the end of the day, what I would say to you, if you were hopping around like a frog, is I would ask you how you're doing. I would ask you how you feel. And if you're able to communicate to me that you identify as a frog, I'm not going to be running around saying, oh my gosh, let me fix this. It's when there's a demonstration that what you're doing may be something that society should care about, that is going to result in some sort of self-harm or a problem for your life. In other words, I'm okay with living and let living, but as long as my trans friends are committing suicide at an inordinate rate and are being murdered left and right because there are bigots who think that whatever your chromosomes are or whatever particular genitalia you might have dangling is the one thing that matters, as long as a friend of mine well, not an actual friend of mine, but someone in Puerto Rico the other night was murdered for using the bathroom that they associate with when bathrooms are for peeing and pooping and hopefully washing your hands when you're done. What people are doing to try to suggest that you can't be who you are is absolutely repugnant, and it is busybody. There's nothing anti-science about this. It is psychology. And even if we were to say, and I'm not saying this, so I'm saying this because this comes up. Even if you were to say, this is all gender dysphoria and it's mental illness and these people aren't what they think they are, what science has to say so far, based on what we've explored and discovered within these individuals, is that being supportive, encouraging, and allowing them to transition is the single best path to them living the life they want to live and surviving. And until that changes, I will absolutely support what the data show is the best way to encourage trans people.
So what I think you've done here is change the topic. The topic was...
I'm pretty sure you said trans before I did.
I did, but I did by analogy. The point I was trying to make was, is there such a thing as male and female, right?
Really? Is that the point you were trying to make?
Because it was, because
we got
what
to this
you
from
did
somewhere
was
else.
You took the category of male, which actually is a scientific category. It's like life is a scientific
I made a distinction between male, female, and man, woman.
Right, and then what you did is you introduced a new concept, which I wasn't introducing, of manliness. And I agree, manliness, which is to say the cultural accoutrement of being a man, let's just say, for example, smoking a cigar or growing a mustache and hanging out at a club, that is manliness. And I agree that that is a social construct. I would argue it's a social construct by and large in accordance with nature, because culture and society develops in congruence with a given human creature. Okay, so
nobody's suggesting that the roles don't have a historical perspective. I mean,
not historical, biological.
Well, sure.
Gender is not an historical concept, it's a biological concept.
When I say historical, I was not denying biology. I'm saying that because of certain biological things, it sets up norms of these are the hunter-gatherers, these are the ones that are going to go out and kill, these are the ones that are nursing children, et cetera else. Those norms are constructs of our head. There's nothing wrong with a stay-at-home dad. There's nothing wrong with a woman working. There's nothing wrong with a woman earning as much as a man makes for doing the same work.
Let's look at what we are arguing about.
Okay.
So in the civil rights laws of the 1960s, we had the principle of color blindness, which is to say equal rights under the law. The law, let's say, should not pay attention to race. I realize this is complex with affirmative action. Let's leave it aside. Let's just say that the basic principle of the civil rights laws is that race is the painted face. I think that was Morris Dees' phrase from the 60s. And therefore, the law should not take it into account. That was the general norm. Now, right away, when sex was added to race in the Civil Rights Act, there was a bit of a problem, which is to say that men and women are very different, particularly in certain areas on average. They're not different in every individual case. So, for example, men are stronger than women. Men are taller than women. Now, you can't refute that by saying, well, here's Sally, she's 6'3", and here's Fred, he's 5'4".
I understand.
Right.
We're talking
because we're talking about in general.
Yeah, norms.
But the normative conclusion from that simple biological fact is we established something that was abhorrent in the area of race. Let's call it separate but equal. Separate but equal was the hated doctrine of segregation, right?
Yeah.
Different water fountains. But we have separate but equal, for example, in men's and women's sports. In Wimbledon, the men play the men, the women play the women. We did that because we recognize that gender is not the same as race. Gender is not the painted face. Men are in fact stronger than women, and they can hit the ball harder on the tennis court, and therefore Martina Navratilova gets to play Chris Evert, and Pete Sampras gets to play Andre Agassi. So our laws, our norms, are based upon this biological, irreducible fact. The norms are a social construct, but they're a social construct, you may say, in obedience to biology. Now, what you're saying is, I take it, that Pete Sampras, or take it, if Pete Sampras can say, well, I came in, I was the runner-up in Wimbledon. Next year, I'm going to enter the women's division because I identify as a woman. Because after all, hold on, gender is a social construct. This is ridiculous? This is going on all over the country right now.
Your example is ridiculous.
Why is it ridiculous?
First of all, it's sports, and sports ball is ridiculous. But
what?
No, I'm sorry. That was a joke for somebody else.
Okay.
My sincere apologies, because I should be.
I'm not a devotee of sports, but I'm not.
This isn't about what the law is. My view on sports, by the way, and many sports organizations have already dealt with this sort of thing, dealing with individuals who are transitioning and studying the science of it at various hormonal levels and things like that. We're still in the fledgling process of getting this sorted. I think that there shouldn't be any gender restrictions on something. If somebody, that we should just have, these are the categories, like a tier A, tier B, tier C, tier D, and you compete at whatever level you can compete at. That way, people who are, whether they're women, men, or neither, whether they're, whatever their identity is, they compete at this level. I am a big fan, I play a lot of pool and snooker. And the fact of the matter is, if you look at the statistics over history, generally speaking, in that particular discipline, women can't compete as well as the men. That's just what the data show from the past. However, there should be no reason why anyone, whether they are a woman under your criteria or a woman under their own, shouldn't be able to compete against anybody else they want if they can play at that level. And so I don't care for gender divisions along sports. I think sports, because it's a physical test, should be divided up on physical characteristics, irrespective of what gender somebody identifies with or expresses with. To go to the sports thing, the reason I say it's ridiculous is, yeah, we're working out these things, but the world doesn't turn, well, all right, sports makes a lot of money, no denying that. We're talking about the law and how it treats people, and we're also talking about human beings and how we treat people.
Right.
So if you saw me walk into a women's bathroom, what would your reaction be? It's clearly, we're at a restaurant, it's marked women's, and I walk in. What's your take on that?
Well, I don't know what my take on it. I can give you my wife's take on it.
Well,
You would feel very uncomfortable if you sprang your testicles in a women's bathroom, as would most of the other women
if I
in that bathroom.
sprang my testicles,
Yeah. Most women, I think,
aren't you assuming I have testicles?
I realize that may be a conjecture. But the more important point is most women would be freaked out if a man walked into the women's bathroom while they were there.
Okay.
That's a fact.
The thing is, there's a lot of factors that are missing from that example, which is, not the least of which my reason is. But do we have any evidence to show that anybody is in danger when a trans person goes into the bathroom that matches their gender identity to use it? Do we have any examples or data anywhere that somebody is more at danger?
Do we have any evidence that trans people who would use their own biological bathroom are being psychologically harmed by doing that? Where's the evidence for that?
So the evidence for that is in the depression rate and suicide rate of people who are being emotionally harmed by not
hold
being
on right
able to
here.
identify.
Stop right there. That's not... Okay, this is what I call arguing inside your own bubble. Inside your own bubble, somebody who is biologically male but thinks they're female, right, are not having any kind of inner clash, no inner trauma between physical and psychological realities, let's call them. They are not depressed or traumatized by the very fact that their own body does not agree with them, right? Rather, they're just traumatized by the fact that they have to go into a men's bathroom. I would argue that if there are higher rates of depression suffered by trans people, a lot of it might have to do with being trans, not being in that particular
No, a lot of it
restroom.
might have to do. So I asked for
You need
examples.
studies
No,
that separate those
I
two
want
things.
examples of who's in danger when somebody uses the bathroom associated with their gender, because forcing them to use the other bathroom. And you know when a trans woman walks into a woman's bathroom, you know who's in danger? The trans woman. They're the ones that are being killed. They're the one in Puerto Rico that was shot just the other day for going into that bathroom. They're the ones that are in danger for doing that from bigots.
Well, I don't want to go down this road only because...
How many?
Only because...
No. Well, what's to stop me? Whether I identify as a woman, first of all, if I was dressed as a woman, you wouldn't even know. What? You don't know what my junk is if I go in and open the door and sit down and use it. You don't have no idea. And it shouldn't be anybody's business what's in my pants or what I'm wearing.
Well, quite honestly, if what
we can
you
remove
say is
gender
true,
from the bathrooms entirely.
if what you say is true that people don't know, you wouldn't even need laws, because this is sort of like
the
saying...
The laws don't do anything to help. There's nothing stopping me from walking into a woman's bathroom and assaulting someone.
But see, I think what you're missing here is this. You know, usually when you see a fence, in this case the fence is the distinction between men's and women's bathrooms, right? And maybe we're overplaying this topic, but what I'm getting at is, if you want to take a fence down, always ask, why was that fence put up in the first place? Who did it and why?
Not if it's my property. I don't care why they put a fence up.
Fair enough. But the point I'm making here is that we have men's and women's public bathrooms for a reason. And the reason, by and large, is, I would say, mostly for the protection of women. It's not that men...
Yeah, trans women are women.
Okay, but I'm not... Look, what I'm getting at is the sexual... We could have 21 types of bathrooms for 21 genders. We don't.
could just have one. As you can all pee next to me. I don't care.
Yeah. So what you're basically saying is that the distinctions that we make between men and women in our society are culturally, according to you, arbitrary. According to you, for example, take tennis. I'm just using sports because we're familiar with it.
That's okay.
You say people should play at their own level, and therefore, If the top 100 tennis players are all men,
That's the way it
doesn't
is.
bother you the slightest. Basically, the conclusion is men are better than women in tennis.
Although what we would say is maybe the top 100 tennis players all have this particular chromosomal makeup, whether they identify as men or women.
Yes, I see where you're going. Okay,